High on their platforms, they were halfway between the living and the gods. With their backs to the sea, their task was to look out over the people, to inspire and protect them. But then, something went very wrong. The statues were pulled down.
At some point in the history of Easter Island culture, these statues that are on the platforms came tumbling down. And when they did so, it was terribly destructive. This one, as you can see, broke the neck. But they also destroyed other parts of the ceremonial platform, pulling it apart with a vengeance. This statue right here has its head completely snapped off, and it's now missing. Or this statue, whose nose is down in the dirt. It didn't break when it fell, but it tells you that there had to have been some kind of violence involved. On this ceremonial platform alone, there are 17 that have been turned over.
The quarry where the statues were carved was also abandoned. Carbon dates suggested it happened by the 1600s, a century before contact with the West. For some strange reason, it seemed the people of Easter Island had turned on their gods. When scientists went in search of reasons, all today's Easter Islanders could give them was a series of incoherent legends of a time of terror, hardship, even cannibalism. But no one could tell them what had actually happened. Then they discovered a new kind of stone implement. Spear tips. These suddenly appeared in the 1600s, the same time the quarry was apparently abandoned. For some reason, the Easter Islanders were making weapons. Then scientists found out what those weapons were being used for. Doug Owsley studied the remains of more than 600 Easter Island skeletons from the same period. What he found was shocking.
This is an older female, and she has in her frontal and adjacent parietal evidence of extensive injury. Would have died either from the problems that were caused with the brain injury or a very small blow that hit right here on the right parietal. And so this is a person that's received a very serious blow to the right side of the head. The entire left side has been fractured.
Owsley realized he was looking at the evidence of people at war with themselves.
When I compare the frequency of injuries that I've observed in the Easter Island population with other collections that I've worked with, it certainly shows the high end. It's the extreme. It was a period of disintegration, social disintegration, and turmoil. You've got endemic warfare. It's chronic. They're slugging it out. There's no doubt about it.
But why? What had caused this catastrophe? What had driven the islanders into civil war? It was Dave Stedman who found the first clue. He's an expert on the Easter Islanders' diet. After studying the leftover bones from their meals, he noticed a puzzling change. To begin with, there were thousands of bird bones.
The bones we found range from things like this. This is a petrel that no longer occurs on the island. Here's a shearwater called a Christmas shearwater that no longer lives on Easter Island. Then this tiny bone might be a little bit deceptive, but it's actually from a very large bird. This is a little skull fragment from an albatross. And you can see here that albatross is quite a giant bird.
It seems that when the Easter Islanders first arrived, their new home was the biggest bird colony in the world. And that meant the islanders had an abundant source of food. But it didn't stay that way. By the 1600s, when the statue quarry was abandoned, all those birds had disappeared.
Almost all of these species of seabirds, these 25 or 30 species of seabirds that I've identified in the early sites, almost all those species are gone. So this big variety of seabirds that Easter Islanders could have plucked from burrows and all that, that food source is gone.
It was the same story with fish. Once the islanders' diet was full of tuna, mackerel, and also porpoises. But by the 1600s, they'd gone too. The consequences appear to have been terrible. These carvings show emaciated figures, their ribs exposed. It seems starvation swept across Easter Island. And starvation may have led to something even worse.
Any little incident, like stealing the food because the people were hungry, will lead to revenge, war, destructions, and ultimately cannibalism grow out of that context of conflict and scarcity, has the ultimate need for food.
It looked as if the collapse of the statue cult and the outbreak of war were caused by starvation. But now there was a new mystery. How had Easter Island gone from a land of plenty to an island so desperately short of food? At first, scientists thought it may just have been the result of the population rising inexorably. They'd simply overexploited resources like the seabirds. But then they found evidence that there'd been something else. Something so devastating that it would change Easter Island forever, trapping the population in a terrible cycle of starvation and warfare. When Westerners first arrived on Easter Island, they noticed that there were no trees. Yet almost every other island in the Pacific was covered in forest. An island without trees didn't make sense. How had the islanders moved their statues? How had they made canoes to catch fish?